Thank you, Mr.
Just
Chair.
want to welcome
Thank you,
Councillor
councillors.
Collins
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
and Councillor Mike Lee and Councillor Fletcher.
Apologies for
Please note our apologies on council business. We've averted an arrest over a consenting issue, so we've
So
been
look, we're
quite
goodwill,
busy.
Tim, Elaine, they've got those noted. So we're, just to let you know, we're actually, that was our first item to the councillors that have just come in. So we're now item 9. Ladies, sorry for so long, but it was important that this discussion happened. And I know that, Rachel, I think you're not
Got a
unwell.
meeting tomorrow morning, hopefully.
Yeah. Look, hopefully this will go through, but you never know. So look, I'm gonna move the recommendation. Can I grab a seconder? Councillor Collins, sorry, and then next one, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Collins, just to put it on the table for discussion. And so I'm just going to invite our ladies to speak. So I'll leave it to you, and then we'll put questions and put it through.
Tato, good morning.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou.
I'm Rachel Kelleher, the Biosecurity Manager for Council, and with me today is Claire Webb, who's the Principal Advisor for the Biodiversity Group. We're here to talk about a submission that's been drafted on DOC's Threatened Species Strategy, which has been developed with input from the Biodiversity, Biosecurity and Natural Environment Strategy groups. Claire's going to talk to that item, so I'll just pass over to her.
Kia ora.
Morning,
Kia ora,
everybody.
Claire. Morena.
Yes, so the Minister in the Department of Conservation has recently released a draft strategy on threatened species management at a national level. Auckland Council has prepared a submission, and we're here today to seek approval for that submission. In summary, the Council is generally supportive of this strategy. We would, however, seek the Department to have a greater recognition of Council's role in threatened species management, particularly on our own lands as a substantive land manager, but also as our role under the Resource Management Act. We're also advocating that the Department prioritise resources for this work. As you know, it's really important that we work together. The Council submission also seeks a greater improvement, perhaps, or effective way of working with the Department, and that's sort of the summary of it. Happy to take questions.
Cool. I just one comment. I think it was that the feedback, and it's in the report, but it was required by 31st of July. Hence, it coming straight to the committee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Questions, and then comments afterwards. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I appreciate that this is a submission around threatened species. Having said that, just around informing our submission, do we have an idea of how the budget of DOCs as it goes to threatened species work has been tracking in the Auckland region over time?
I might have to ask Rachel to answer that one.
And that goes to the number of staff that are directly employed in that area and the spend, if they give any breakdown on that spend.
If I might respond to that question, it's a difficult one to answer, and I think the response is that we don't have that detailed information. I think it's fair to say that in the Auckland region, DOC's species management work tends to focus on the offshore islands that they manage in the Hauraki Gulf, and that because of the national prioritisation that DOC takes to species management, their program is not as expansive as it is in other parts of the country.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Just coming back to my question, is it possible for us to have some information around that? Because the anecdotal information that I receive from people I know is there's been a substantial decline in the number of people employed around threatened species in the Auckland region, and also a significant decline in the amount of funding.
I would be happy to seek that information from the Department of Conservation.
And if that is the case and we can receive it, it would be useful to append it to our submission, because I would suggest so much comes down to money and application, and if the money's not there, well, what can you do? Thank you.
Get it back. Councillor Casey.
It bothered me a wee bit in your report when I read that we were managing species that the government didn't deemed threatened enough to put any money in. And in the submission you've addressed that, but I don't think you've done it hard enough. In the submission you say, we seek that DOC address more species. I mean, I would suggest if we have 41 species that they haven't addressed, we should say that our species that are threatened should be the same as your species that are threatened. Why wouldn't they be aligned?
Yep. So the Department of Conservation prioritise threatened species at a national scale, where council's own threatened species programs run at a regional scale. So we look after regionally threatened species. Sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't, because there may be populations of certain species that are secure outside of the Auckland region, but should naturally occur within the Auckland region, but due to our own challenges they don't, and therefore we might manage them for those reasons, where the department would not see that as a priority at that national scale.
Forgive me, but surely if a species is only located in Auckland, and some are, that they would be on the government's radar for funding. So are you saying that if we have a species that is not on their register, then we fund it ourselves? Is there any like that?
In most instances, the species that we're currently managing that are threatened within the Auckland region are also threatened nationally. But in those instances, the way that the department manages those is to look at that national picture of where those species exist and what the state of those populations are in other parts of the country. And they make their decisions around management based on ensuring that they've got secure sites. Usually they pick the biggest of the sites that do exist for those particular species. So it might be that those species are threatened in Auckland and also nationally, but the sites that DOC are managing are outside of the region. So from a regional perspective, we still want to see those threatened species persist, and that's where that management often falls to council.
So can you give an example of a species that we would deem threatened and top of our list that the government deems it's not on their list because it's regional? Just give me one at the top.
So I think just to clarify, it's not a case of that it's not on their list. They will be actively managing those species, but they may not be actively managing them in Auckland region. So an example of that would be kokako. So the national management sites for kokako are King Country, Te Urewera, and I think they've got one other site, but that would mean that places like Hanua and Waitakere are not funded as part of the DOC national program.
So it's about where DOC cuts off their funding level then?
It's about they're making decisions similar to the way that we do about where to invest their limited funds to secure those species at the minimum number of sites they can, so that they can manage as many different species as they're able to.
Cool. Matua Brown. Matua Wilcox, then Matua Brown.
So I'm just going there, first of all, to the purpose statement, where you're saying you want to change to set them on recovery path, which enables them to thrive and be appreciated. Now, just tell me the corridor behind this.
Bless you.
So as Rachel's alluded to, the way in which DOC manages threatened species is generally on their own conservation estate. So where council feels quite strongly is that beyond those sites, we want to extend management of threatened species into what would be their natural range, and that involves having some words around that in the strategy itself, which was silent. Perhaps it's fair enough to say it's a point of clarification that we want to make sure that a holistic approach to threatened species management is acknowledged in the strategy, and also because of that it's acknowledging council's role in threatened species management, particularly under the Resource Management Act, because keeping species in the places they should be often fall on private land, and that's where the council becomes a regulator and a manager of indigenous habitat of threatened species.
So my second question relates to we're lucky in Auckland in that we do have one sanctuary, being the Hauturu Island, where quite a lot of translocations off the island occur with the Auckland Council. I just didn't see anything in here regarding working with the treaty partner, except as in the Mātauranga Māori context. So where was that going to fit in?
So I think that's a good point that you've raised, and I think we've picked that up in the submission. Although the strategy talks about the intention to engage and incorporate Te Awa Māori into the strategy, it is silent on how that might happen, and that's part of our submission, is seeking a bit more clarification around exactly how that will work.
So where do I see that in the submission? Because
That is under goal 3. Oh, I'm afraid we don't have any page numbers, but yes, under section 3, where the submission speaks to some of the goals. It's section 3, goal 3. We talk a little bit about seeking some more detail around that, some outlining of approaches on how that might work.
yes, because I'm reminded of our work we did in the Hunua Ranges, which basically followed the old ARC method to the T and was really quite successful, which included tangata whenua being involved in the Hunua Ranges when we did the possum eradication in there. So I'm just wondering why we didn't kind of bring that kind of to the fore there, because the old ARC kaupapa was actually pretty well spot on, that's all. Was there a reason we didn't use that ARC model?
I think it's fair to say that we've kept the submission at fairly high level, but what we're recognising is that that's an important aspect of the strategy moving forwards in terms of DOC being successful with threatened species protection. But what, from our perspective, was not detailed enough was exactly how they intended to do that, and we would like to see some commitment around how those types of approaches are going to be addressed. And so that's really how we've focused our submission, is getting more information from DOC around how they intend to implement that goal.
And finally, just one little one, Chair. Yeah, so we do have a mihi or a karakia or tēnā koutou in this kaupapa, don't we?
Yes.
Ka pai.
Kia ora. Councillor Moakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And can I thank the officers for the excellent report. I would just like to add a couple of points, and they do relate to threatened species that are in the Auckland region. And the first one, I guess, is the most iconic of all, North Island brown kiwi, Apteryx mantelli, and remarkably, one of the most successful populations of North Island brown kiwi on Paunui Island. And the last information I had of the status of this population is that there were some 2,000 birds on the 1,795 hectare island, which was remarkable good news, but the bad news is that they're exceeding the island's carrying capacity. And those who were at the Auckland Plan refresh meeting yesterday may have heard me talking about carrying capacity and the limits of nature. But Paunui Island is at its limit for supporting kiwi. And so what happens to the excess population? Well, they starve and die. It's something I'm sure the SPCA would be interested in, but I hopefully we can help solve this problem by encouraging DOC to translocate some kiwi from that very successful population to other islands. Now, there is a catch, because DOC genetic scientists or consultants believe that this population of this Auckland population, successful Auckland population of our national bird, are not really pure. Doesn't mean that the species is hybridised in any way, and not pure within the species. So the genetic theorists have broken the North, or divided the North, or defined the North Island brown kiwi into different taxons or kind of races. And the problem they feel with the Ponui kiwi is that they're a mixture, and that is bad, apparently. But not apparently for the Ponui kiwi, who are doing better than just about most populations in the country. But apparently they were only released on Ponui in 1963, and some came from Little Barrier Island. And the Little Barrier Island kiwi were actually from Taranaki. But they found lice on the Taranaki introduced kiwi that would suggest that the original Little Barrier Hauturu kiwi survived and mixed in with their relations from Taranaki. And then some were from the Hokianga, and one or two were from Coromandel. And they were introduced in 1963 and have been, as I said, very, very successful. DOC have the attitude that this population, even though it's a pure species, it's purely Apteryx mantelli, is somehow tainted, contaminated, and therefore are happy to turn their backs on them and let them starve or whatever in this island.
Okay.
I don't think that's good enough, and I think we need to, and biosecurity council officers are very, very keen on seeing something done to help this population by translocating it to other areas to satisfy DOC that won't enable those kiwi to mix in with their conspecifics, who are considered pure. So I think we should be thinking about that, and this is a good opportunity for that. So I'll leave that. Okay. There's another iconic species I want to talk about under our noses, and that is a tohiroa.
Yep.
Mr. Wilcox and I have discussed this in years past. That until the 1950s, I guess, was we had a very abundant population on the west coast at Muriwai, one of the national hotspots for that animal, an iconic, popular New Zealand animal, the toiroa, and there were seasons every year where people would go and get them. However, since the advent of motor cars on the beach, or vehicles and SUVs, that population has gone into serious decline, and the evidence would suggest that impacts of cars on the beaches, which are in the places where toiroas are located, is very much related to their decline. I think we need to be working with DOC to do something about the tohiroa, which is an iconic New Zealand and Auckland, indeed Auckland species. So I'll make those 2 points.
Okay.
And leave those thoughts with the officers. Thank you very much, Mr.
No, that's
Chairman.
all right. So Councillor Lee, just to let you know that, one, good you asked a question at the first part, and you've taken...
Oh, did I go into the talking rather than questioning?
And this is why I'm just saying you're speaking right. You've already said what you wanted to say.
The question is, what do you think of that idea?
No. So I'm just letting you know, Councillor Mike Lee, that you're speaking right. You have none now. You've just taken that up.
Not ever.
Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to speak briefly. Mine is not a question.
Okay. Any further questions then? And then I've got a list for speaking. Any further questions? There's none. So I'll go to Matua Brown, and then Councillor Fletcher, you're next.
Yeah, look, recognising it is a national document of sorts, and agree with your observations that, you know, it's pocketed, if you were, around the level of interest given the content. So there's a couple of things within the makeup of what you're looking at in, say, the council submission that I just want to maybe make sure that you're aware of, insofar as recognising the Māori impact statement, the view around Māori or iwi support control. That's largely true, but they also, more importantly, support eradication. And I wondered whether you had a bigger appetite to focus on that commitment of the department around pest-free, so as regardless of the threatened species or the number that somebody's picked out, that actually the ultimate solution here is to become pest-free. So is this not also an opportunity to throw some grunt into that, so as we can start reading with some sincerity a true commitment by you guys as officials of both council and DOC, so that we forget the number of 150, because I'm keen to understand the origins of that number. So that's the comments that I have around the preparation of the submission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Killed it. Taken on board.
Absolutely.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a really important issue, and I don't think we can do justice today to go into it as comprehensively as we need. I mean, this is about the future of conservation, and I don't want to be provocative, but if we'd just relied solely on the Department of Conservation alone, we would not have had any of the goals, the gains, the wins that we've had in recent times with regards threatened species. So to me, the future is all about partnerships. So I'm really hopeful that this submission can appropriately reflect that and give substantial weighting to the councils and also to the private sector, who are going to play an increasingly significant part in the conservation gains on the New Zealand estate. So I wish to support this. I wonder, however, Mr. Chair, if you would entertain under B the inclusion for the final sign-off of Councillor Lee and Member Brown, because it is such an important document that in terms of submission. So that would be my recommendation, and I would hope that you might incorporate that rather than me doing an amendment.
I mean, I've got no issues at all, and I mean, it's also open to the whole committee and the Independent Multi-Statutory Board that they can come back to both Councillor Holst and I in regards to any additions to this, bearing in mind it's the 31st of July. I mean, look, I'll leave that up to Councillor Lee and Member Brown, but I mean, you know, for me, the opportunity to feed back to staff, and including both the chair and deputy chair of this particular committee, is open there. This is why we wanted to at least include B.
So Mr. Chairman, if you are willing, I think that would be appropriate, and I'd also really just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the outstanding staff that we have that work in this area. We inherited some wonderful people from the Department of Conservation, which has helped enormously through a period of instability in DOC, that we have been able to see these people come through. And Rachel, who's here today, and others, I just want to salute you and commend you and say that you are making a significant difference to the future of New Zealand, Aotearoa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, because our staff have always been, every time we meet with them, we've sort of said, hey, look, we're just so fortunate to have you. Member Brown, I'm just going to give that option to you in regards to B. If you wish to be on there around the final approval, I
would certainly like to peruse the final draft.
Okay, and Councillor Mike Lee?
Thank you.
Yep, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
look, if we include that, it'll be part of the recommendation that both myself and Councillor Collins are there.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of acknowledging the staff, I also want to acknowledge that they don't just contribute in their paid capacity. I think you will find that the majority of the staff who are working on this also give a huge amount of their time voluntarily.
We meet with the staff on a monthly, even sometimes, depending on the issue, fortnightly basis.
So I encourage all of the staff and the elected members to get involved in a voluntary capacity.
I totally agree, so they have always acknowledged every time we meet with them, both ourselves and the chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so look, it's been included. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Collins. Going to move those recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10 of